Pam's going to start us.
Yeah, Pam's going to start.
Huh?
Here she comes.
Oh,
right,
okay.
I'm here. I didn't put the other. All right, I guess we're going to start now. I just want, on behalf of Wayland 250 and the Wayland Historical Society and Museum, I thank you for coming. My name is Pam, and I'm a volunteer here for the town's 250th anniversary. I wanted to, again, thank you for coming. I'm so excited to see everybody's excited about history, because this is cool. And could you raise your hand if you've never been into the museum before? A fair share of people who have never been into the museum. Thank you for coming.
Can't hear you back there.
I don't know if it's on. Joey,
There you go. Yeah.
can you hear me better? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry about that. So again, thank you for coming. I'm excited that you're excited about history. I am a volunteer with the museum and with the Wayland 250th. I want to talk to you a couple things about, do some housekeeping before we go. This is about a 1-hour tour. And as you can see, this is a major road. There's no horse and buggies today, so it's going to be loud. So please come closer. We're going to try to get into sure. No, there is no. Okay, this is it. Sorry about that. Everybody like the squeal on that? It's kind of nice. So it's a 1-hour tour, a little over 1 hour. It's going to be walking. We're going to start here. Gretchen, who I will introduce in a minute, she will lead us to where we go, and our first departure is going to be down our driveway in front of the building. There's also something I haven't told you, but Waycam is here, and this is Maya from Waycam. She is going to be videotaping the entire experience so that future generations will have information from Gretchen on all the things that she knows. Yes.
Scary.
She also has a GoPro strapped to her, so she is recording everything. She will use the speaker if she needs to. And also Maya will be capturing this tour. If you don't want to be in the film, stay behind Maya, and please let her go. Please let her go ahead if she's trying to get by to take pictures of Gretchen. We are going to be using the front yards of properties. Gretchen was able to get permission for some of the properties that she's talking to actually stand in the front yard because this is very loud, as you know, the traffic. Afterwards, in the house, you're invited to go and see what a colonial home looks like. And there are cookies, 1,700 cookies. They weren't made that long ago. And there's cider if you're interested afterwards. You will be able to look at the 4 lower floors. There are 4 upper floors. You can do that when you come back to visit at a different time. And I'm sorry, but there's no restrooms available today in the house. If you need to use the powder room, the library afterwards, okay? I just wanted to give you that information. So the first person I'd like to introduce is the president of this amazing museum and historical society, and that is Sherry Ann Bryan.
Welcome to the beginning of the tour here at the Herd House Museum, which is part of our Wayland Historical Society. And we have lots of events planned for this fall, which you can pick up a flyer with those at the other card table out front, as well as our newsletter that just came out this week, and it has all of the events listed. The next great big one is a fundraiser with a exhibit of our quilt collection, which we have never shown as one collection before. There are 30 items in the collection. They will be distributed among the rooms in the house. And as a fundraiser, there's a different price for each day's event. It's Friday through Sunday, October 17, 18, and 19. So we hope you'll pick a day to come and help support us and to see what a fascinating collection we have. Our oldest quilt is 1800, and our newest is 1976, when the high school staff and students helped make, for the bicentennial, made a quilt. And we are showing that one as well. So we have a wide range of years in our quilts, fascinating patterns and so forth. So come and enjoy with us.
Okay.
Thank you, Sherry. And if you do come to the quilt event, you will see the interior of the house closer, and because you get to see them in the house, presented in the house. So I just wanted to introduce our guest speaker today. Her name is Gretchen Schuler, and you may or may not know her. Who knows Gretchen? Raise a hand. Does anybody else want to introduce her? It looks like everybody else can introduce her probably better than I can, but she's a pleasure to work with, as you all know. She is an expert in historical architecture. She's a member of the museum and the Historical Society. She's been a resident for a few years now, over 40 years.
49.
49. She was involved with the preservation studies at BU. She's a recipient of the Lydia Mariah Childs Award, among other things. And if you have a historical house, or you live on a road with a historical house, Gretchen probably did some of the research on that. And if you are interested in finding out what the website is to find out about historical houses, please see somebody in the Historical Society, and we can explain to you where you would go on the internet to find out about your historical house or one in your neighborhood. So everybody are warm welcomed, and thank you to Gretchen for doing this, and I appreciate you all for being here.
Okay. All right, I have a microphone, and if it's not good enough, we'll go to the bullhorn. So just tell me. I know that I need 3 hands if I carry that. So somebody has to be next to me to carry all the other stuff. So speak up, just raise your hand, and I'll try to up the volume. I hope you've all been able to pick up the 2 maps. We've given you one that was made in the 1880s or 90s by James Sumner Draper, showing you what Wayland looked like in 1775. So he had done a ton of research. He made one of the our Bibles for research. It's called a street list, and he researched all the houses that were still standing in 1890 or 1886 or whatever it was, and then told who built it and who lived in it each time it was sold. So he had done all this amazing research that we who are trying to document historic houses depend upon. Go to that first. It's available online. We can talk to you another time about that. The other map is the 1908 of Wayland Center, and these were done commercially. There are several volumes. There's 1875, 1889, 1908, and so again we have the names of the people that owned the various houses, and you can see the ones that were built after 1908 aren't here, and some that are here are no longer here because they were demolished since. So we're going to start. I have 2 sets of pictures that people are going to pass around, and you can just pass them amongst yourselves. And we're going to start with this, the Grout Herd House, which was the Grout House when it was built in about 1740. Jonathan Grout married in 1743, and that often is a reason that new houses were built, as the person left the family home and built their own house. And so that's what we're going with. The unusual part of this house is it's been moved twice. The first time, the picture that you have here that might be going around, it shows it in 1868, and this was while it sat here in its present location, a little bit farther forward, but here. And then the town decided to put a town hall here. So they asked the owners to move it, and the head of the committee that wanted to build the town hall, the new town hall, lived up. Do you know the stone piers that are just before you get to the town center? He lived there, Hodijah Brayman, and he said, "Come on, bring the house up here, and we'll keep it there." So the people that lived in it, the herd, sisters moved with the house up there, and their mother moved up there, and the house was there from 1878 until 1962. The Herds passed away. The house belonged then to Raytheon in 1954, and eventually Raytheon said, we don't want this house here, we need to build our plant, and so could you just take it back? They gave it to the Historical Society, and then the Historical Society needed a bunch of time to raise the money to move it back. When you go in the house, you can see pictures of the town hall, which is here and going around. And you can also see pictures of the house coming back, being moved back. It was on rollers and it came down Old Sudbury Road. So this is the town hall that was the second town hall. The first one was across the street, which we know as Collins Market, and it was called the Townhouse. And it was built in 1841, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we move away, only because we can't get off the road there. There's no place to move. This house was built here, and then when it returned, it's still the same, at about 1740, as I said, the front part, the 2 rooms in the front and the 2 rooms upstairs. And it would have had a lean-to or a shed across the back, which would have been the kitchen. It was a center chimney, which you can still see. And when we get across the street, if you look back, you'll see the chimney is not up on the ridge. It's partway down, and that's because the roof was lower until they built the back part, the second story on the back part, and then they had to raise the ridge, but they didn't move the chimney. The chimney is gone inside the house. That is there to just tell you that there was a chimney, but it's gone. When it moved, they did not take the chimney. So unfortunately, we've lost that. Let's see. So in 1788, Silas Grout owned it, and he had just married, and then he added on the back part. It really extended that kitchen into a proper room. And then his daughter, Jerusha, married a Herd. They were Grouts, and now it's Jerusha Grout Herd in 1822, and they built this L here, this side L. And that was in order for her mother, Susanna, and her brother and sister that were unmarried to live here, and she and her husband, and then eventually their children, lived in the main part of the house. So that's kind of the quick history of the house. There's tons more to say, but we'll never get anywhere. So we're going to go out to the driveway because there's steps in the front.
Do you know how old that tree is in front of it?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that. Yes, the beech tree in front of the Grout Herd house was one of a pair. There were 2 on each side, and they were planted in about 1879 when the town hall was the new town hall was there. And unfortunately, we've lost one, as you can see, and it looks like we're going to lose the other one too. It's really not in good health. And we did have the Hartney Graymont chose it for their Arbor Day tree 2 or 3 years ago, and they treated it for free. It's very expensive to save these beech trees, unfortunately. And so it was treated once, but it needs it continually, and we probably will not be able to do that because it's probably beyond. But yes, they're very old.
What happened to the town hall?
It was demolished in 1958. So maybe some people remember, but I don't. I mean, I was born, but I wasn't here. So, okay, so this is the Ebenezer Ames house, and only capturing his name, the man who built it in about 1823. He was a notable figure, supposedly, in Wayland, in development in particular. Oh, you can't hear? Okay. Now can you? I can't, I'll have to use the bullhorn.
Oh, it doesn't
I don't think this goes higher. How about that? Does that change it? At any rate, Dr. Ames only lived here very, very briefly because he built just down the road, number 15 Old Sudbury Road, the red house that has the iron fence in front of it. He built that one and moved there. In 1829, he sold this to Samuel Mann, who was a lawyer, Esquire. And then hereafter, Ames had moved up there, which I said. In 1831, Mann sold it to Mellon. So Mellon was a big deal in town, and he was here for a really long time, and his ancestors, several generations, owned this house until the mid-20th century. Mellon had graduated from Brown University. He was a close friend of the Reverend Francis Wayland, who gave money for the free library to open, and that was accepted by town meeting on March 6th, 1848, and that's a really important date because it precedes the founding of the Boston Public Library, and it makes it the first library in Massachusetts, although there was one in Franklin that was a subscription, a subscription library. And did I lose it? Can you hear? Okay. And so maybe some people say that is the first library, but they were really talking about the free public library. And his money had to be matched by the town. And the town collected $553 from 208 donors, and that was fine, except Mellon, who was a lawyer and he was about to be a judge, had really questioned whether legally a municipality could raise money, mandatory funds, taxes, for a library. Hence, he got together with the minister, the pastor of the First Parish Church, John Burt White, and he had just succeeded to the general court, Burt White had, and so they got together and they filed legislation, and it was passed in 1851 that in fact towns could use municipal money for libraries and could raise it by taxes. And that was but we were a little preceding it, and I guess nobody obviously challenged them. So Mellon was the Chief Justice of the court in Worcester. His widow lived here until 1893, and it was followed by his daughter Anna, who had married a Bennett. And the Bennett house was huge. There's only a little tiny bit left, and it's behind the, maybe it's not Exxon anymore. There's a white house behind the Exxon station just as you come into town. Is it still Exxon? Whatever. At the corner of Plain Road. And so they lived there, but they had this house. And then in the early 20th century, it became known as the Teacher's Lodge. At the time, Miss McDonald, who taught 1st and 2nd grade, and Miss Smith, who taught 3rd and 4th grade, lived here, and the street listings confirm that because they say that their residence is at the Teacher's Lodge. And I have been told, and I didn't look this up again, but that they were not able to be married to be the teachers, and that's why they had to live here or work from out of town. In 1936, Anna Dixon Ela, and so she was 3 generations removed from Mellon, and her husband Roger Ela, might be a name that some of us remember, not that we were here at his, but it was kind of historic, knowing he was the town moderator, town council in the mid-20th century, and he was a founder of the Wayland real estate company that developed the Shaw Estate, which is Shaw Drive. And he and his wife moved up there then, but they all still kept owning this house and leasing it out. This one, and then they acquired the one next door, so they did the same thing. 20th century, but we've got other history there for 19th century. Okay, so now we're going to go to the Sibley house. I guess we could just cut right through there. Somebody just mentioned to me the change of the name of Sudbury to East Sudbury to Wayland, which I was going to talk about in the beginning, and of course I forgot. So at any rate, we were part of Sudbury when we were founded in 1638, and the very first meeting house was up at the North Cemetery, and that didn't work eventually for people living on the west side, and so they petitioned to have a meeting house built on the west side because they had to come across the river every time they came to meeting. And don't forget, this is when religion and municipal town services were all combined, and so you went to the meeting house to learn about what was going on in your town and also for worship. So at any rate, that in 1725, when the other meeting house was built, we had two precincts. We became East Sudbury and they were just Sudbury. And then in 1780, the legislature approved us as a separate town, and we became a town of East Sudbury. We had more, I don't know what you call it, but as a municipality rather than as a precinct. It was part of Sudbury. We had our own government. And then in 1835, Francis Wayland had given the money for the library. He was a great friend of Judge Mellon's, and he suggested that we call our town Wayland. And that's how we got the name. And so 1835, we just changed from East Sudbury to Wayland. And the only thing that we lost in the first part was that all the records for East Sudbury, which was the precinct of East Sudbury, ended up in Sudbury. So we have to go there for the research up to 1780 and then back. Fortunately, there's so much online now than when we ever started, so it's easy to access.
How'd they get the name Wayland?
After Francis Wayland, we named it after him who had given the money for the library.
And who was Francis?
What?
Who was Francis?
Who gave the money to the library?
That was his name.
Who was
President Brown.
Oh, I'm sorry. He was the president of Brown. I'm sorry. I thought I had said it before. Okay. He was the president of Brown University, where Mellon went to university there, and so he had befriended him and continued their relationship, and he came to Wayland with some frequency, apparently. So this is the Mark Sibley House. It was built somewhere between 1818 and 1821. It's a federal with Greek Revival decor, I should say. It is a center hall with twin chimneys. See, two chimneys on each side. And so the hall goes straight way through with rooms on each side. Sibley was the innkeeper of the Pequot Inn, which we'll talk about over at the Public Safety Building, because that's where it was. This had many later owners. Most of them were probably well-to-do Wayland people because they didn't live here. They were investments. And at some point it was owned by Luther Gleason and Isaac Gleason and Hodijah Brayman, who moved the Grout Herd house up to his estate property. And so, you know, that they just had them and they rented them out. After Hodijah Brayman, the Bennetts that were here had purchased this house, or the next generations, and they sold it in the 1950s to Richard and Shirley Secor, who were here for 30 years plus, and Shirley served on the Historic District Commission. This is all a historic district, and for 20 years, and then her family, after she passed away, gave the historic markers as you enter the historic district. There's a picture of the First Parish Church and markers on each of the four paths coming into the district in her memory. So we're going to go over here to the public safety building. Can everybody hear me pretty well right now? Maybe we'll stay here for a minute. Okay. Wayland, obviously there had to be inns and taverns and all sorts of things for where people could gather besides going to church. And the Pequod Inn is Pequod House, it was called, was at the point where this public safety building is. It was built in 1771 by Elijah Bent. He was a housewright and an inn holder. It was a stagecoach stop till the mid-1800s. Now, one of the pictures in that group of pictures shows the inn. Do you have that? Does anybody have those pictures? Okay. So, do you find the inn? No? Huh? I just don't know whether they have found it. Have you found it? Yeah, okay, fine. Okay, so that's the Pequod House, and then there's a later picture of it, the second picture, is of the late 1890s when it was called the Wayland Inn. They changed the name to that, and there was obviously a rendition, renovation at that time because the roof is much wider, more of a overhang, and they have king posts in the gable peaks, so you can see the cross in the gable peak, and I think it's in those pictures. If you pass those around. At any rate, it was the stagecoach stop until the mid-1800s, and then the name changed, as I said. The railroad came in 1881, and the trolley in 1892. So that kind of was the end of the inn, because you weren't in your horse and buggy, and you didn't have to spend the night before you either returned to Boston or went on to wherever you were going. In 1920, it was quite derelict by then. It was empty. And the Edmund Sears, who lived on Pelham Island Road, and he was the grandson of Edmund Sears, who wrote, it came upon, yeah, thank you, right. And he was the pastor at the first parish, the first Edmund Sears. Walter Henderson and J. Sidney Stone became the trustees of the Pequod Inn, and they decided they paid the taxes and they agreed to demolish it, which they did in 1928. And they gave the land to the town so that the town could use it for its whatever it needed, like another municipal building. However, the town didn't get around to that until 1957, after they abandoned the one that was on the site of the Ground Herd House. Some of the paneling from the Pequod Inn was taken by Stone up to his house on Lincoln Road, and it's still there. And he built a wing on his road, and it's one of the houses that's very close to Lincoln Road on the straight part, that's the dirt road across from the fields that we purchased a few years ago, the conservation restriction we purchased, that are all walking trails there. So it's still in that house. And so then the land was vacant. Does anybody remember the building that was here? It was a low brick building. Remember that? And it was, some of my friends used to call it the A&P because it looked like an old A&P. It was the town building until our present town building, which was a school, was built in 1935, and in 1978 it was converted from the school to the town offices. So then the town offices left here, and it was just police and fire at this location. And that was demolished in the early 2000s, and then the present public safety building was built. So, okay, let's go across there, and you can look at the public safety building, and now our goal is to get across Route 20. And I don't know whether people want to hold the traffic when we get a light for everybody to get across or what. But
Be patient because the light will turn for you after the Route 20 traffic has been stopped.
right,
And before the tunnel
Right.
starts.
right. We probably ought to wait for the
It's in the whole cycle.
fire and police to go through. Let me just say a little bit about Collins Market, because it's just such a wonderful and important building here, and there's no place for us to get off the road over there. It was built in 1841 as the first municipal only building. Before that, municipal offices were in the meeting house, of course, and then after the meeting house, that our fifth meeting house, which is the First Parish Church now, was built. The town meeting, etc., was held in the Green Store, which is the Kirkside, but it was different. It looked differently then. And then they were also, there's one other place, I'll figure it out in a minute, where meetings were held until this was built. And here was the library, our first library in 1848. They moved in there. And then there was a meeting room on the second floor for town meeting. It was a townhouse until 1878, when the new town hall, that giant stick-style building, was built on the site of the Grout Herd House. And this one then was purchased by a man named Lorenzo Lovell, and he had a dry goods store. He had a dry goods store on the Common, which we'll talk about when we get over there, but then he bought this building and had a dry goods store there for a really long time. Lawrence Collins worked for him for a while, and then in 1922 he took over, and then they eventually bought the building, and so then it was Collins Market, which some of us remember. It was until the 1980s, so everybody remembers Collins Market. That was there, and now then it was converted to offices, and it might be a coffee cafe and a bistro. There's an application before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and they've got some hurdles to get because of you can see all the parking that doesn't exist. But they had a good first meeting, and hopefully they'll get there, and then it'll be resurrected as a public building, public space. Okay, shall we make our break? I know, exactly. And I forgot that I didn't talk to the new owners of Kirkside, and I forgot about all the vegetation. I'll quickly talk, can you hear me? Okay. I'll quickly talk about why this is the fifth meeting house and wasn't built till 1815, even though it's called the First Parish. The first meeting house was built in 1643, and it was up at the North Cemetery. That was the center of town, and it was no cemetery yet, and then meeting house, and then cemetery. The second meeting house was 1653, and the third one replaced it in 1688. So they just kept either needing a new one or need a bigger one. We don't have a lot of information on those. So at that time, there was a bunch of unrest on the on the west side of the river, as I mentioned before, because it was a big deal to get across the river once a week, especially in the winter when it was frozen. Maybe it was easier than having to paddle across. At any rate, they decided to petition the legislature to see if they could, in fact, the general court, to see if they could build a new meeting house on the west side. That was 1723. I said 1725. My apologies. The new meeting house was built at Sudbury Center, and we were divided into two precincts. At about the same time, the farmers in Cochituate said, wait a minute, we have a really long distance to go all the way up to the North Cemetery, so could you just move that meeting house a little closer? Which they did, and the meeting house, the fourth meeting house, was about where, on this side of Collins Market, but about where the chiropractor's building is, about in that location. And it was actually on the edge of the green, which was bigger than what we have now. So they moved the first meeting house there in 1726. And then in 1814, we're now the separate town of East Sudbury, not the precinct. The town voted to build a new meeting house used for religious purposes only. So we were kind of ahead of the game because the state legislature did not require that until the 1833, I think it was. So they dismantled that meeting house, used most of the wood over here in what we know as Kirkside today, which we'll talk about in a minute, and built this magnificent building that is, I think it's just iconic and so beautiful, and such. It's definitely the center of our historic district. It was remodeled in the when it was first built. The sanctuary was on the ground floor, the first floor, and it had galleries around the sides that looked down into the sanctuary. And so then in the 1850s, they decided to change that, and they put a floor in between the galleries and the sanctuary and moved the sanctuary up to the first floor. The original sanctuary had a very, very high pulpit so that the people in the galleries could see the pastor. And when they put the sanctuary on the second floor, they removed that pulpit, put it in the basement, put it somewhere, and had a new mahogany pulpit. And then at the same time, they had to change the windows, because the windows, when you go around the side, you'll see that they are single hung, 12 lights on the first floor, and then triple hung, so it's 3 sash on top of each other on the sides. They had to move those up. They were double hung, move them up to make them triple hung to give more light into that sanctuary, and kept single sash on the ground floor. And they also painted everything sort of dark colors, earthy tones. Then in the late 19th century, taste changed again, and they decided they wanted to go back to the white surfaces, white walls, and the old pulpit was brought back out of the basement and refurbished and put back into the sanctuary. This meeting house has one set of its sheds, 12 sheds, and people bought those by subscription, or they rented them, I guess, so that you always knew where to put your carriage. And there was another set of sheds across the back, and those do no longer exist. But there are only 3 meeting houses left in Massachusetts that have their sheds and their meeting house, which is really exciting, and we're one of them. One in Lancaster and I think Sudbury are the 3. Let's see what else. There was an addition here in the 1990s, and then in 2003 or 4, I think a lot of you will remember, the tower, the bell tower, was brought down, and it was lying right here while they restored it, because they had found a lot of instability, and so they restored it, and can't compete. Right. The other unique thing about this meeting house is that it does have a Paul Revere bell that was installed in 1814-15 when the meeting house was completed, made by Paul Revere's foundry, and it's still there. And the other thing that I think most of you know is that there is some good soul that arrives on April 19th and rings the bell calling the Minutemen to Concord, to gather, to go to Concord. And so they gather, they used to gather on the Common, and they gather and they march up to to Concord from here. Our Minutemen did not actually make it to the North Bridge, but that's another story, and that's something that we're going to hear a lot about in the next year. And I probably should have been talking about what this was like during the Revolution. This wasn't here. Grout Herd House was there. There were one or two other buildings that were here during the Revolution, and everything else is newer. See, I want to talk about that house. Oh, let's talk about Kirkside first. And I'm so sorry, I just completely forgot that all this vegetation has grown up. And so you really can't see it, but if you can get a little bit lower and just see some of this magnificent house. It was brought from the fourth meeting house. It was brought over here and put back together in this place. Parts of it were used, and they had to add to it. And it was Jonathan Fisk Hurd who lived up. We're going to go to that house too. The owner is right here, shaking her head. And Luther Gleason, who also lived right on the other side of the district. They were house wrights and carpenters, and they were the ones. They petitioned the town. They said, "Can we have the fourth meeting house now, and we will reinstall it for a store and a residence over here." And the town said, "Sure, that'd be fine, but you have to have a meeting room for town meeting, because we were no longer meeting here. So we had to have a meeting room over here." And they built the upstairs room, and if you've been lucky enough to be in the house, it is so beautiful. Of course, it was changed, but then it was just a plain old room in which meeting could join. Then in 1888, Willard Bullard, who was the president of the Cambridge Trust at the time, lived in Cambridge, and he bought that house and turned it into the Colonial Revival building that we have today, that is just so beautiful. It has such beautiful Adamesque, what we call Adamesque swags, and lovely exterior trim, and then inside as well. And on the other side, there's a Palladian window. It's just, I can't say enough about it. The former owner is somewhere. I saw her somewhere here, and it's really a magnificent house. And there are new owners. I haven't met them yet, but I'm hoping that we can get them to join the Historical Society, and maybe someday we can all get to see the inside. It'd be great. So.
That house was featured on This Old House.
This Old House, thank you, in 1992, yes.
I think you can find the episode if you look, I think, on YouTube or something.
Yes.
You can actually see inside.
Oh, that's right, you can see that, yeah, you're right, you're right. There she is. Right here? Okay. She knows. Okay, so I just want to talk about the Trinitarian Church and that house, and I just sort of hate for you to have to cross. Just one time I'd like to go there. So can we get up the side a little bit or go around this way? Okay, I just want to mention this. There is one picture in the group of pictures that you have. It looks like this. And it is the, on the right side is the Trinitarian Church, the first one. It burned in 1922, so you can pass that around. And on the other side, there should be a couple more around. So this was the split occurred in Wayland in 1828. The official split of the Congregationalists moving away from their mother church, if you will, because it had become too liberal, and they wanted to maintain their orthodoxy. So most of them left. I mean, some of them kept the building, and other people had to leave. But in this instance, they left, and they held meetings, their worship in the Green Store, which was what is now Kirkside. And then by 1835, they built their building, which is that first one that you see there. That building burned, as I said, and they had to build a new one. They burned in 1922, and the new church was built in 1928, and then added to subsequently and many times. The first high school is also in that picture, and it's, can you see, you probably can't see it from here, but it's the next building to that. It's an Italianate building, and I can say thank you to all of you because you went to town meeting and you voted for us to give them money to restore the windows. The windows had all mostly been boarded up, and it was looking a little sad. And so we did approve that at town meeting, and they restored the windows, and there is only a preservation restriction on it for 30 years. If you do a lot on a building, usually with preservation money, you have to do a preservation restriction for a long time, or in perpetuity. But because it was $80,000 and not $1 million, we decided that it would be a 30-year restriction, which just protects the windows. I mean, windows don't last more than that anyway, so they'll have to do something different. It was the first high school from 1854 to 1896. The town decided to build another school next to it, which is now a park, the Center School Park. That building came down in 1976, right when we moved here. I remember seeing it, you know, I didn't know where I was, and I was seeing it and then not seeing it, and it was pretty sad that that came down. It was a colonial revival, classical revival building, had lots of interesting trim. It was purchased, the high school was purchased by the Independent Order of the Oddfellows. We call them the Oddfellows Hall. They bought it in 1894. Their mission was friendship, love, truth, faithfulness, hope, charity, and justice. Could use a little bit of all of it now. And they were represented of various trades and walks of life who worked together to help others. It was moved a little bit north because it was more on that park, and when the town wanted to build the new center school in 1896. And so it's subsequently owned by the Trinitarian Church now, and you know, thank you so much for keeping it up because it looks great right now. Before we go across, let's talk about the Captain Edward Gooslin House. The owner is here somewhere as well. Can everybody see this well enough and hear me? All right. So it was built in 1866 in the Italianate style with colonial revival additions or trim. He was a retired sea captain who came to Wayland in 1859 or 60. You want to say something?
No.
Oh, I didn't know if you were going to correct me. You correct me. Okay. He came with his wife and his infant child, Frank Gooslin, and they had an older son too, Charles. He continued to work as a sea captain as the census in 1870 said he's at sea. So presumably he was at sea. He was one of the highest taxpayers in 1870s.
Still is.
Oh. And he was one who petitioned the state legislature to extend the railroad from Weston onto Sudbury. There were many others that were involved too, but he was one of the petitioners. The cannon from his ship was apparently fired off when the first train came through. It was very dramatic. They had a big ceremony at each station that was a new stop, and so I guess he lent them their cannon. I don't know how he got it here. On rollers. He should have talked to Henry Knox. So this was sold in 1896 and then again in 1908 and sold to the First Parish. The First Parish is, they used it as a parsonage, and then eventually they changed it into a parish hall so that the extension, the long, low and L was classrooms that they added. It is a hip roof. We've had a couple of other hip roofs, but I just call your attention to the hip roof, and it also has the widow's walk around the top, and presumably, I guess he thought he was still in Salem. I don't know where his wife was going to look for him there, but that was the point of those, that they were up there so the wives could go, and hopefully not widows yet, and see their husbands returning. Let's see. The other thing that's interesting about it, it was a gigantic parcel, and that's one of the reasons he was one of the highest taxpayers, and it went all the way to Route 20, and then it wrapped around behind the Trinitarian Church. So he did have those parcels to sell at different times. He also built the first two houses, well, not the second one because it's completely changed, on Route 20. In the 1880s, he built those two, and he owned other houses in the area. Willard Bullard did buy this at one time too. There was a lot of transactions between 1896 and 1908, and it was 1908 that John Maynard Parmenter bought it, and he was in Bow Road, the first house on Bow Road that was a tavern in the 1700s, and then subsequently he was one of the future generations, obviously, and he's the one who purchased this house and gave it to the First Parish Church. That was it. And the interesting thing about Maynard, he and his brother had the largest cattle herd in Wayland in the late 19th century, and they took them to New Hampshire every summer for them to graze up there and fatten them up, and then drove them back. Not driving them in a truck, just, I guess, walking on horses, etc. Okay, that's that. So now we want to go to the town green.
It's kind of noisy to go into the lawyer's office here.
Oh, okay. Yep. Pam was just saying it's kind of noisy over there. So the town green, it was called the Wayland Common at first. It's now known to us as the Mellon Law Office Green. In 1838, it was owned by James Draper, and we have the Drapers cropping up all the time. James Draper is the one who gave the town the townhouse, the land, and he gave them $1,700 to build the townhouse, which we're going to go down to Old Collins Market, and then they had to pay it back by $200 a year, the town. So it was a loan, essentially. And his son was James Sumner Draper, that we talked about, who did the street list and many other things. They all lived on Plain Road. There was a whole fleet of houses there, 4 or 5 houses that were Draper houses. So on the green, there was the Mellon Law Office, which is there now, that you see, and that was first Samuel Mann's, and then Edward Mellon's Law Office. There was a shoe shop. There was the Lovell's store and post office from the 1870s, before he got into the Collins Market one. And there was also a Samuel Russell provisions store, and those were facing Pelham Island Road, because remember, Pelham Island goes through there and bisects that from Route 20 and from the Cochituate Road, and it was a 2-acre parcel. It was huge. It was much bigger than what you see now. There's a picture in the pictures going around, the H.F. Lee and Company. That was a general store. Come around. So, as I said before, the green was assembled in 1720s, when Boston Post Road only went to much farther east of this and then went up sort of along Plain Road. And then it was extended in the 1720s out to here. And then we had the Pequot Inn, which not until 1771, but nevertheless. And then Boston Post Road made the corner and went up past the Old Town Center. It wasn't extended beyond that until much later. So the 2 acres were purchased from Hopestill Bent in 1723. And you know the red house next to the pool and next to the high school? That's the Hopestill Bent Tavern. That was built in the 1720s, and that's where he lived, and he ran a tavern there until the late 1700s. So the 4th meeting house was on that 2-acre parcel over there before these stores. The stores were in the 1870s, but early in the 18th century, it was the meeting house, and there was a town pound about where the law office was scooted a little bit farther north. And that's about it. That gives you the feel of that green. So let's go across to the green, and then we're going to go up Sudbury Road. Hi, Rita. How are you?
I didn't know if you saw me.
Yes, I did.
Great job.
Quickly tell you, the first house we came to after we passed the law office is known as the George Smith House and Store. He built it in 1845 to be a store, and he also had a post office there, that post office, and he lived there as well. In the early 20th century, it was the Catholic rectory, because the Catholic Church was being built in 1905 at our post office, where our post office is today. And before it was being built, they were holding services in this building, I'll call it the townhouse, right next door, and the priest lived at the Smith House. The little building in between is now a real estate office. That was the first freestanding post office in Wayland. It was officially called the U.S. Post Office Wayland Branch. And in the 1950s, it was a drugstore. It was the first drugstore in town, 1953 to 56. And then it was a real estate office and a store, and then now back to a real estate office. So Collins Market is probably our iconic Greek Revival building. It has all of the standards of Greek Revival architecture with the monumental fluted columns carrying the pediment in the front. And it's just a beautiful building, and thankfully it's being preserved. There was a move to demolish it back after they built the town hall over there. They thought, oh, let's just get rid of that. And fortunately, enough people prevailed at town meeting. Apparently they voted to go ahead and demolish it, and the next day they rescinded the vote, which was great. I'd love to. I should read the town meeting minutes on that, because it'd be interesting. So remember I said that the Lovell had a store on the green, and then he moved into this building when he purchased it, the Collins Market. He lived right here. But let's go back to the beginning. This house was built in about 1820 by Jonathan Fisk Hurd. He's the same one that took down the 4th meeting house and moved over and built the green store, which is now Kirkside. Very different rendition of it. So he was here. The different parts of it are later by Lovell. The projecting bay on this side is more Italianate in features. The federal features here are this wonderful fan light and the side lights on the doors. The entry to this building was over on the front, facing the road, and it went right up the stairs. It was an entry there. And then when you go back there, you'll see that there's a sort of a projecting entry, and that was now a two-story projecting bay, if you will, but squared off. It's not rounded. Let's see. The first one that was here, Jonathan Fisk Hurd, he was a wheelwright and a builder, and he worked with Luther Gleason. They had disassembled the house, which I told you about, the meeting house. And his son, Franklin Fisk Hurd, became a well-known attorney in criminal law and authors of many books on the subject. And Jonathan's account books from 1824 to 1850 were transcribed as part of a WPA project here, and the transcriptions are available at the Grout Hurd House. Have we ever thought about digitizing those? It might be something to do.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
I'll add it to the list.
I know, right. Let's see, it was Lorenzo Knight Lovell that bought this in 1874, and they were here for generations, including the present owner as a descendant of the Lovells. And so it was passed down through the Marjorie's husband was a descendant, a cousin, I believe. Is that right? Cousin, right, yeah. I guess that's pretty much I mean, there's loads that we could say, but I've gone way over time. So we're not going to go up Sudbury Road, Old Sudbury Road. We have property owners here that said, sure, come to our driveway, and I'm really sorry, and thank you so much for being so generous, but I've gone over my time. What am I going to say? But I think we should talk about the library and the Roby House, which is just beyond that, which we can do from the library lawn. And the railroad station, which will go past here, I call it the Wayland Railroad Station. We call it the depot, because that was what it was called. It was built in 1881 in the stick style. It was a station for the Central Mass Railroad line, and until 1955, when the station was closed by the railroad, but the railroad was not discontinued until 1971. And I talked about the cannon from Captain Puslin's ship that was used here. The freight house, and we're also the only one on the entire central Massachusetts line that has its passenger station and its freight house. The freight house is right over there. Again, you all, thank you very much. If you voted for the money to restore that, we painted it. We had to have a lot of the board and batten siding replaced, and then it was repainted. And did I see Rick Conard? He's not here, no. We have one member of the Historical Society, Rick Conard, who is the authority on, if you want to know anything about railroads, you got to talk to him. But he did make a model of this when he was a senior in high school here in Wayland, and it was the colors then, and so he was able to help us. We had a color analysis done, but he was able to really tell us exactly what the colors were because he was here as a child. So that's that. Several years later, the remnants of the railroad, the turntable, the water pump, the platform, the light post, were all discovered when we did some archaeological work when they were talking about changing the towers. And those are all National Register eligible. All of this is a local historic district, which is regulated by the town, but it's also a National Register district, which is an honorary degree, and certainly all of those would be eligible for the National Register as well. They have not been added. They were added to the historic district, but they've not been added to the National Register district, but we will take care of that, we hope. So, yeah, let's go over, let's cross it. This is our first library separate building. Remember we had the library at Collins Market or the townhouse. We had the library at the very large stick-style town hall that was on the site of the present Grout Herd House, the former and the present site of the Grout Herd House. And then this land. So Mr. Roby, Warren Gould Roby, who lived in the yellow house over here, gave $25,000 and a half an acre to build a library that he wanted to be as quiet and as perfect as one could get. And he then died before it happened, before he actually had it happen. But then his family gave more land, and they ended up with 1.3 acres, I believe. So the architect was Cabot. Where's Maureen? Cabot something Mead, Everett Mead, was the architectural firm, and it was Mr. Mead who was the architect for our building here. He had just been to Italy, and he had seen some of Donatello's works, friezes, and so those are copied, or essentially, or they're inspired. They inspired him to do the friezes on the rotunda inside, over the windows, which are really beautiful. The building, we call it Richardson Romanesque. It is old, heavy, very different from New England architecture and from other buildings in the district. And with the nod to the Greek, with the very monumental columns, with the volutes at the top, carrying the signboard. The library was, I'm not going to, there's so much history on the library, and there, we can go on and on about it, and there are lots of other places you can find it, but I just have to say that this wing was done in, I think, 1983, and it was an expansion that was planned by Tappé Associates, and they echoed the original rotunda on the projecting bay at the end down here, echoing that, and that part, that with the rounded window, was dedicated to the memory of Charlotte Louis Gossels and all the other innocent victims of the Holocaust, and it was donated by Charlotte's sons, Peter and Werner Gossels, and their families, who were able to come to America as children. They were 6 and 9, I believe, and then, made what they are. And they both settled in Wayland, and Peter was our town moderator for a lot of years, and Werner is still with us today, living in a really beautiful house, federal house. At any rate, I just think it's excellent that we have that to remember her, and their family. I'm really glad that we did that, and I don't think, unless you go around and reading plaques everywhere, you probably missed those little bits and pieces. The Roby house over here, which you'll have to just look at when you go by, or you can walk up there. This was the first Roby house, and these are around in the stack. Okay, that was built in about 1725 by Ebenezer Roby. His son was Dr. Ebenezer Roby. We have his saddlebags from him going around the town to treat people. They're actually on exhibit at the library right now, I think. Is that right, Kay? Well, she's not here. No, she went there. And then it was subsequent generations of Robys until we got to Warren Gould Roby. He was a cousin, somehow related. And then the house burned in 1887, absolutely to the ground, and he rebuilt that house. And if you go with the picture, you'll see that it's very, very different. But when you drive by, you probably think, oh yeah, I saw that picture before. And it's not, but you can see by the stone piers where they are, and how the house, it's a colonial revival now. It was there you go, right, that's the old house, the first house. So that was a colonial house in the Georgian period, and this is colonial revival, 1888, and it's really beautiful. So the last picture is of the barn over there, which, can you see the barn or not? Not quite. Okay, so the barn has a weather vane, or did have a weather vane on it, that is on the picture of the barn, and it is now in the Shelburne Museum in Vermont. And I actually had forgotten that little fact, and I was there at the Shelburne Museum, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, what is that? And they had a little bit of the wrong label on it, but so I wrote to them. I don't know if they've changed it or not, but at any rate, it does still exist. It's not on the building anymore, and they did not make a replica of that for the building. The rest of the houses all have really interesting histories. You were asking about the Benjamin Austin Dudley house is right through there, the gray house. And that's the one that had a little bit of a come on in the article that was written about the tea house. And there was a tea house there in the 1911 to 1926, I think. And it was Isabel Mackenzie who bought the house, and she had come from Canada. She was a servant at the Roby's house in the late 19th century. So she bought this house in 1907 and eventually opened a tea room. And then there's a picture in the Wayland Historical Society newsletter, and all of you who are not members of the Historical Society, you can still go online to the waylandmuseum.org, and you can see hit on newsletters and September 2025 newsletter, and you'll see the article about that house and about the tea room, or the tea house, as it was. There was a lot of misinformation about it, but we've kind of straightened it out, and we're trying to get it right. And then there was one other house. The next house was in fact here during the Revolution, and it's 1771, and it's been moved twice. It was moved from Bremen's property down south a little bit because he wanted to build his big stick-style house, which is no longer there, and then it was moved back in the 2010, I think, or 12, and through historic district review on that too. Thank you so much for coming. Remember, if you need a restroom, you probably want to use the library, because the steps are worse getting to the one at the Historical Society.